All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'll make a slow start. My name is Andrew Schaefer. I'm logging in from Trafalgar's Birdhaven office in Johannesburg. I've got three colleagues joining us for this evening's webinar, which is on collecting arrear levies. Karine Kutsia, who will start us off this evening, just talking about the legislative framework, which is applicable to charging levies, when levies can be charged and collected, and supporting resolutions which link into the collections process. We've then got Benazir Ghulam and Claire Meredith are our national managers involved with debt collection, and they will talk us through the pre-legal process of collecting arrear levies. And this evening we've invited Natasha Saronio from Saronio Attorneys. Natasha is one of our most effective attorney panelists involved with collecting arrear levies. And Natasha will explain to us the legal process, the steps involved, some of the pitfalls, the current timing implications of the legal process, and then some tips and recommendations of compressing some of the delays and challenges in the legal process. So that is our panel this evening. Just a few points of interest. Firstly, there will be a short survey that pops up at the end. If you'd like to provide feedback, we would appreciate it, just in terms of whether you found the content and the topic relevant and interesting, any suggestions for other topics you would like us to cover with our monthly webinar series, and any preferred timing for these. So that feedback will be appreciated. Obviously, just close it and ignore it if you don't have the time for that. At the end, there are contact details for all of us. So if we don't get around to answering any of the questions, Karine and I will just type answers as we go. If we don't get to a question, the contact details are there. We'll gladly come back to you after the webinar, probably tomorrow, with any follow-up questions. And certainly if you'd like a copy of the slides to discuss with your trustees or directors, we'll gladly send you a copy of the slides. And a recording of this webinar will be uploaded to our training website, which is training.trafalgar.co.za. And that will be uploaded by Monday next week. So there will be a record of it for you. I think this topic is a really important one, because certainly collecting arrear levies has a direct impact on the cash flow of a property scheme. And properties with positive cash flow, with cash flow meeting their needs, are much easier to manage, much more simple for the trustees to perform their functions, and certainly maintenance and service delivery in those complexes becomes much more sustainable and easily achievable. But certainly in complexes where there is a challenge and growing levy arrears, we start seeing a vicious circle of delayed maintenance, delayed municipal payments, and certainly the pressure rises in terms of lifestyle and maintaining continuity of those services. So actually collecting arrear levies is critical and has a direct bearing on cash flow and those other features I mentioned, and hence it's really important to have a tight handle on collections. So tonight we'll hear about, what can make it easier and more effective and more successful in terms of collecting arrear levies, what to be aware of, what to think about, and what to expect in terms of a managing agent, what is feasible, what is legal, and certainly, how to participate, because there are elements in which trustees, caretakers, and other residents can support the collections process. So thank you. Karine, I'm going to hand over to you to start us off with the relevant legislative requirements in terms of collecting levies. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm just going to look and start with sectional title schemes, because that is the bulk of what we manage in our branches is sectional title schemes. I am going to look at homeowners associations at the end as well. But if we look at a sectional title scheme that is governed by the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, there is a requirement in the Act for two funds to be held by the body corporate. The one is the administrative fund, and the one is the reserve fund. Then there's a requirement in terms of the Act for owners to make contributions to these funds. Now, this is normally known as levies. The Act doesn't use the word levy. They talk about contributions, but in general terms and in general language, we talk about levies. So owners are required to make a contribution And also the Act stipulates that these contributions only become due and payable once the trustees have passed a resolution to that effect. So the owners at a general meeting will approve a budget, but then after that, the trustees have to pass a trustee resolution with regards to how the levies will be raised. The Act does not stipulate how levies are payable. That is determined by this trustee resolution. We call it, in Trafalgar, we call it a levy resolution that we get the trustees to pass. And standard practice is normally to determine that levies are paid monthly, that it's paid on or before the first of the month, but this is not a requirement by the Act. We have complexes that pay annual levies, for instance, not really standard practice, but it is possible. And it is very important that the trustees pass this resolution within 14 days after the AGM and notify the owners with regards to how levies will be payable. Okay, if we look at the calculation of levies, we know that the levies are a function of the expenses. So each scheme will be different. Each scheme has different expenses, and this is done in terms of a budget. The budget is approved at the annual general meeting by ordinary resolution. If you don't know what an ordinary resolution is, you can email me and I can send you our easy guide to resolutions. But in short, it is a majority vote to pass an ordinary resolution. The trustees also have the right to increase levies, but only at the start of the financial year by a maximum of 10% without consulting the owners first. So if the trustees see that an increase is needed from the first day of the financial year, they can do that. Otherwise, they can wait until the AGM to increase levies. And the AGM must be held within 4 months after the year end. But sometimes the trustees feel that there will be a loss of income or there will have to be too big an increase. So they rather decide to increase it from the first day of the financial year. Normally, levies are calculated on participation quotas. That is the standard practice. But it is also possible for a scheme to decide to calculate their levies on nominated values. And for that, you would need a special resolution, which is in short terms, there's different ways of getting it, but in short terms, it will mean that 75% of the owners in number and value will have to vote in favor of using nominated values instead of participation quotas to calculate the levies. There's also something called special levies or special contributions, if we use the wording of the Act. The Act allows for trustees to raise special levies over and above the normal levies, but only in instances where it's needed for unbudgeted urgent expenses. Otherwise, they should wait for the next budget. But if it's urgent, money is needed very quickly, then the trustees have the right to raise special levies by trustee resolution, and the trustee resolution will also decide or determine how the levies will be raised in which installments. They can decide it's for a certain period, it's just for the next 6 months or for the next 3 months. And special levies are also calculated on participation quota or nominated values. I've seen instances where the trustees raise special levies and just divide it equally between all owners. That is not correct in terms of the Act. Another type of levy that we deal with is the CSOS levies. So since 7 October 2016, the CSOS Act became enforceable, and the Act prescribes that all community schemes must be registered with CSOS and that all community schemes must pay CSOS levies. So they also determined a formula to raise these or calculate these CSOS levies. You'll see the formula on the screen there. And then there's an exemption for certain levies. So what you'll see, if you just look at the formula, you already see that schemes whose levies, monthly levies are 500 Rand or less, are exempted from paying CSOS levies. There's also another exemption, and that is for households where the monthly net household income is less than 5,500 Rand per month. They are also exempted from paying CSOS levies. And then there's a general misconception that retired people don't have to pay CSOS levies. This is not correct. It is not all retired people that are exempted. It's only the people that receive SASSA grants. They are also exempted. And for retired people, those are who are in frail care or those are in assisted living. Only they are exempted from paying CSOS levies. CSOS determined that the CSOS levies must be paid monthly to the body corporate and paid over quarterly to CSOS. And they also determined an interest rate on CSOS levies of 2% per month. If we look at action that can be taken with regards to arrear levies in terms of the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, the Act gives the trustees the right to charge interest on arrear levies. For that, they would need another trustee resolution. We call it an interest resolution that we get our complexes to sign. If there's no trustee resolution for this, interest cannot be charged. Interest raised as an income for the body corporate, but it's normally not budgeted for. And we get the trustees to review the interest resolution on an annual basis. Suggested interest rate would be like something like 15%. It's better not to use prime as a decider, because when we have to go to court to collect arrear levies and we have to calculate the interest rate along the line, and every time you have to go and see what prime was at a certain stage. So better to have it as a fixed percentage, like 15% or 18%. The Act says that the interest rate must not exceed the maximum rate of interest payable per annum under the National Credit Act. The National Credit Act at the moment talks about 24% per annum. So your interest resolution cannot exceed that. And then also in terms of collection, before the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act came into force, body corporates only had the option to hand the defaulting owners over to attorneys for collection of arrear levies. Since 7 October 2016, with the CSOS Act and the STSM Act, we can now also hand over these people to CSOS, to the Ombud, for collection of levies. So I'm sure Benazir and the others could talk about the practicality of that and how that works. And then also the Act, the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, stipulates that a member is liable for all reasonable legal costs and disbursements as taxed or agreed by the member that the body corporate incur in collecting the arrear levies or other amounts owing to the body corporate. Just touching on homeowners association, and that will be my last slide. The Sectional Title Schemes Management Act that I've just discussed does not apply to homeowners associations. You will have to go and see what your MOI, if it's the homeowners association, is a company, or the constitution, if it's a common law association. You will have to read them to understand how levies will be raised and how it will be collected. But homeowners associations are also, the members are also liable to pay a CSOS levy. That is it from my side, Andrew.
All right, thanks very much, Karine. So I think I'd just like to emphasize, the reason that Karine's given the summary she has is that this supporting documentation is really important to, first of all, justify why levies are charged, when they are charged to owners, and to justify interest being raised on the arrears. If that documentation is not correctly in place, it definitely does compromise the pre-legal and the legal debt collection process, because the courts are looking for that documentation to justify and quantify the claim, and they most certainly will disqualify claims on interest and even the levy charges themselves if those resolutions which Karine mentioned are not in place. So it's crucial that they are covered, that they are aware to the trustees, and certainly that they support the whole collections process, which we're covering tonight. A question we often ask by owners is, what does their levy pay for? Or what is the breakdown of a levy? And the simple answer is the approved budget is a breakdown of the levy. So all the expenses that are itemized in the budget gives the breakdown of the levies, because the levies are budgeted and quantified to cover the approved budgeted expenses for the particular scheme. So, that really explains to the owners what their levies are being paid towards. Right, we'll move on now. So I'm going to invite Benazir to cover the pre-legal process. So these are the steps which a managing agent can typically take within a debt collection department. and these would be pre-legal and prior to the need to hand over to an attorney for escalating a legal collections process. So Benazir, thank you. Over to you.
Okay, so what I'm going to run through is the pre-legal debt collection process. This will be the process attended to by our internal debt collectors. So all managing agents and debt collectors must register with the Council for Debt Collectors. So we have a certification. The Council for Debt Collectors has a code of conduct as prescribed, fee structure. The website is www.cfdc.org.za. The council does offer dispute resolution service for all those that dispute their debt collection fees. May I have the next slide? Okay, so what you see before you is a flow chart where the debt collectors will attend to the soft collections process. So the first prize is that the debt collectors make telephonic contact and call the owners. Our debt collectors have a target where they must contact the owners at least twice a day, and they must make between 30 and 40 outgoing calls per day. They also receive incoming calls. If no contact is made, the debt collector will send an email or WhatsApp or an SMS. If there is still no contact or no response from the owner, then the debt collector will contact the body corporate estate or estate manager to receive further details. We also have tracing tools that we employ at Trafalgar. We have several tools. We have CPB, we have SearchWorks, and we also have the attorneys that trace as well. Once the debt collector has made contact with the owner, either to attend to a payment arrangement, they will update the notepad. The notepad is so that we can keep a track of all the occurrences on the account, whether arrangements were made, if there was a query internally, either municipal query, etc., so that we can just keep track of what has happened on the account. Okay, next slide. Okay, what is soft collections? A lot of people ask us, what is the process that entail? What does the process entail in our soft collections process? So this is every effort made to contact the owners. So what we have is four letters that we send out every month. We have the partial payment letter, which is sent on the 4th of the month to indicate to the owner that they've paid partially. The next letter that we have is the 7th reminder letter, payment reminder letter. And then we have the 15th letter, which is your letter of demand, demanding that the owner attends to payment as they are 2 months or more in arrears. And thereafter, we have the 25th letter, which indicates that the owner has been officially handed over to an attorney panel. So the debt collectors will attend to letters, calls, and SMSs. You must note that all of these correspondences will attract debt collection fees, which is on the Annexure B table for the Debt Collectors Act. Okay, what are the tools that we use for tracing? We use tracing tools such as CPB and SearchWorks, as mentioned before. This is vital so that the attorneys receive all the contact information prior to handover. When the attorneys are unable to serve documents, then we will also instruct them to trace as well on a no trace, no fee basis. We can move to the next slide, please. Okay, the attorneys must be able to serve the letter of demand. The next topic is how will the body corporate or HOA assist us? So in the legal process, we will need to serve the documents on the owner. Generally, we will have the domicilium address of the owner. However, if not, sometimes there might be a tenant in a unit. If there isn't a tenant, there may be a plot, an empty plot. So we do require all this information from the estate managers or a building manager to assist us. Or sometimes we may not have that option. It's either security or a caretaker that will assist us with this information. So all in all, we employ a holistic solution to the debt collection process. Okay, what is the Debt Collection Act? In terms of Section 19(1)(a) and (b), the debt collector is entitled to collect the capital as well as any interest that is raised on the account. Interest is raised in terms of a specific interest resolution that will be specific to a body corporate or an estate. They have their own interest per building. It will not be the same across the board. The debt collector will also then collect the necessary expenses and fees that are allocated to the levy account. These Annexure 19(1)(a) and (b) is stipulated specifically in our management agreements, as well as the addendum on Annexure C and D in full. Okay, blacklisting. What does blacklisting entail? So TPN is a platform wherein landlords can monitor the payment profile of the relevant tenants in a residential aspect. From sectional title, we can monitor the owner's payment profile as well. So when an account is 3 or more months in arrears, then we are entitled to blacklist the owners. It is vital that we send them the 15th letter for the purpose that the 15th letter will indicate that we are giving you written notice, indicating that you have 20 business days to inform you that you will be blacklisted. The accounts that will be blacklisted are predominantly the handover accounts. Once they've been handed over, we will blacklist the account. What does this mean for you? So if your account is blacklisting, it means that you have a negative listing on TPN as well as Experian and as well as TransUnion. So those are the profiles wherein we blacklist. What does this mean? It means that the owner will not be able to obtain credit via either a home loan or personal loan or, you know, household accounts, etc. So that's the impact that the listing will have. The listing will be, you'll be listed for up to 12 months. So TPN does record your listing for a period of 12 months. However, we do continuously ensure that accounts are listed that are in arrears. The only way your listing will be removed is if your account is settled in full. Next slide, please. What is flagging? So we have an internal system at Trafalgar, whereas to enable us to monitor our accounts, we have a flagging system. For example, if an owner has attended to a debit order, then assigned a debit order form, etc., and we have the mandate, then we will collect the levies via debit order. If it's a payment arrangement, payment arrangement with the flag PA indicates that you've signed a payment arrangement with an acknowledgement of debt document, which will assist us in the legal process. If you are a mid-month payer, and we will allocate you as an MM, a P is a normal payment arrangement that you've attended to. Generally, we allow payment arrangements between 3 months to a year. So it should be 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months as a maximum. However, all payment arrangements must be sent through to the trustees to agree to the payment arrangement or not. Then lastly, we've got the Q. The Q can indicate where there might be a query on an account, whether it be water, electricity, or meter readings. Okay, so as I discussed earlier, our start-off process is where we must telephonically contact an owner. However, if we've sent all our letters, we've tried to contact the owner telephonically, we've left voicemails, and we have now exhausted all our internal efforts, then we hand over to a lawyer firm, C&G Attorneys. C&G Attorneys are currently our panel attorney. However, they also assist us with soft collections. What does this mean for us? Soft collections is currently a 14-day period whereas CNG will hold the file. They will send a letter of demand. They will also call excessively, as well as obtaining payment arrangements and signing of AODs. All the charges for CNG attorneys will be in terms of the Debt Collectors Act and in terms of the Annexure B fees. Once they start billing fees, we will pen our fees on our side. If they're not successful within the 14-day period, the account will be handed over for legal collections, whereas they will be handed over either to a panel attorney or an attorney selected specifically by the trustee or HOA. Okay, and then to hand over to my colleague Claire, Andrew. She'll be doing the next slides on important tips that she's come across in the debt collection process.
Yeah, certainly. Just before we do, Claire, will come to you now. I'd just like to emphasize a few things. First of all, it's so important that we make contact with a debtor, with somebody in arrears, to bring it to their attention. That what the value of the arrears on the account is, and really what we're pushing for is a payment arrangement or an acknowledgement of debt from them, so we get a commitment of how those levy arrears are going to be settled. So therefore, contacting is dependent on correct contact details, and that's why Benazir explained the tracing systems that we use, because it is that important to make contact and to be able to have that discussion. And really, it's a key focus of our debt collectors is to contact clients in person, telephonically or on WhatsApp, to be able to go through that discussion and to push for those payment plans or acknowledgement of debts. And we're trying to avoid a legal handover and a lot of the expenses and the delays which go with that, which Natasha will refer to earlier. So absolutely crucial. And certainly a key role which caretakers and trustees can play in terms of actually getting contact details if other tracing systems are proving problematic or inaccurate in terms of making that initial contact. So certainly really important to take cognizance of. In terms of the soft collections Benazir mentioned, what we find is that if we fail in terms of pre-legal from our debt collectors' point of view, actually getting an attorney involved does often make clients take notice. It's an escalation. It's a way of demonstrating to them that it's serious now. It's time to take note. It's time to take action. It's time to try and get this under control. And that pre-legal step is before summons, before a formal handover to an attorney collections firm, before legal fees start becoming, significant and material. And it's a last effort to try and, get that payment arrangement or acknowledgement of debt. And certainly some clients do tend to take note when they are contacted by an attorney firm in that soft collection stage, which is really important. So just some tips and some practices which do make a difference. And then the blacklisting is an important lever. It basically holds the clients accountable for paying their levies, for reducing their arrears. There are implications in terms of blacklisting with credit facilities. Banks take notice. Banks get, alerts in terms of blacklisting, and it's a way of, exercising leverage to make clients take notes to try and bring their levy arrears under control. So it's a really important lever to use, and Benazir explained the letter of demand, which is required to be sent in advance for the blacklisting to be followed through. All right, thank you, Claire. Over to you now for the next two slides. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Claire Meredith, and debt collection is one of my passions. So the most important thing is to actually ensure that the levy statements are accurate every month and that they're sent out before the first of the month to make sure that the debtor can actually budget for the levy payment when they get paid on a monthly basis. So we do check and make sure that all the email addresses that we do have is correct. If there is an incorrect email address, it will reject on our system, and we will follow up then telephonically and get the correct email address from the debtor. We need to make sure that we can eliminate as many queries as possible, because if there is a query, the debtor will not make the payment. So we make a phone call, and basically the debtor will actually email us and say that there is a problem. when they reply to their statement that they've received, and we would then escalate those queries as soon as possible to actually have them resolved. Payment plans are very important. The first thing that I feel is that if the debtor is in arrears, to actually make that contact with the debtor and explain that they've only got a certain length of or period of time to actually settle that debt. Give them first the option to tell us what they can afford. If the amount is too low, you negotiate with them and just say to them, it's impossible for us to accept such a low payment plan. So 9 out of 10 times the debtor will actually understand, and they would actually make that effort to actually increase their monthly payment if they understand where it is affecting the body corporate. It's also very important to emphasize on the debtors that if they do not pay their levies, it is going to affect their credit scores and their blacklisting, and it is going to be difficult for them to actually get credit out there. 9 out of 10 times, a lot of companies now also, before they employ anybody, they actually do a credit check on an employer for somebody before they employ them. The leverage that we have is centralized amenities like hot water, communal facilities, and to actually give them difficulty in actually gaining access to the entrances. We have internet access and DSTV, which can be interrupted to try and get them to actually make payment. And this is an inconvenience for them, and very often the debtor will actually make that payment. Debt collectors should engage with debtors in a polite and professional manner, applying the approach that they are assisting the client to catch up their levy arrears. Consistent follow-up is impossible. It is important. So if somebody says that they're actually going to make a payment, diarize that time and get back to that debtor at that specific date to make sure that you follow up on that payment. Next slide, please. Okay, so important tips for pre-legal collection. It's very important that the credit controller or debt collector understands the account. If you don't understand the account, and if the debtor asks you for a question, you must never have to say to them, I will get back to you, because that puts you on the back foot immediately. So look at the account, study the account, understand the account before you make that call to the debtor. Make personal contact. If the account has been paid every month and all of a sudden in the last 2 months the debtor has stopped paying, make that personal contact. Say to the debtor, we see that you've been paying your account every month. Now you haven't paid for 2 months. Please, can you actually just discuss it with us so that we can understand what your problem is? So that personal contact is very important. And very often the debtor will actually open up to you and say, this is my problem, you know, and understand and be sympathetic with them, but very firm. They need to understand exactly how their non-payment of levies is actually affecting the body corporate and the financials. Always give the debtor the first option to discuss a payment plan, as I said before, and then if that's not going to help or it's not going to improve the debt, negotiate a higher payment with them. Keep an eye on the AOD payments. Everybody likes to receive a thank you. So if the debtor is keeping up with the AOD arrangements, they will send you that proof of payment. Say thank you to them, because next month they're going to be pleased for you to say thank you to them again. And then also give if you're discussing the finances with a debtor and the debtor tells you that they're really deep in arrears all over, give them options. Tell them that they need to try and get debt consolidation. or apply for an extra bond. Okay, this is where the debtor will actually open up with you, tell you what their problem is, and then you can actually understand what the problem is, how far in debt they are, and you can actually take the next step from there because you know what you're actually dealing with. And that is very important. You cannot just hand over without actually understanding the debtor's situation. So, yeah, that's my bit.
All right, thanks very much indeed, Claire. So I think those practical tips are important because they make a difference in terms of pre-legal debt collection. It's certainly the focus of the discussion and the contact I mentioned that the debt collectors make a significant effort to try and achieve, and it goes a long way in terms of a positive outcome with the pre-legal process. Now, if pre-legal fails and the steps that have been alluded to have been followed through, they have been undertaken, and there's no successful result, then the next step is a legal collections process. And nobody better to take us through what those steps are and what's involved than Natasha Saronio, whose core business is legal collections and who has a very strong track record of effective legal collections within the framework of a challenging legal court system, which I'm sure Natasha will refer to. So Natasha, thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for including me in this webinar. Okay, so the collection of arrear levies is a standard process, and this process is being regulated by the magistrate court rules. So as you heard previously, the first step of this process is the letter of demand that normally happens in the soft collection department. This letter of demand is sent to the owner, informing the owner of their breach, so that the owner knows they are handed over to an attorney, that legal action is going to happen. And it also allows the owner the opportunity to resolve the matter. They can either make payment or they can enter into a payment arrangement. And during this time, the owner is called by the attorney as well as by Trafalgar. The owner is sent emails as well as WhatsApp messages. If an owner does not respond in that soft collection period, the file is handed over to proceed with summons. A summons is issued at court. The process to issue a summons normally takes between 2 to 4 weeks, depending on which court it is, because every court has its own timelines. Then once the summons has been issued, it's sent to the sheriff to serve on the domicilium address of the owner, which is normally the unit if the owner hasn't changed that address in writing. The sheriff then takes about 2 to 4 weeks to serve the summons on the owner and to provide the attorney with a return of service. The owner has 10 days from the date that the summons has been served on the owner to either resolve the matter by entering into an arrangement or to deliver a notice of intention to defend. During this time, the owner is again called. The owner is again sent emails, and the owner is again sent WhatsApp messages to urge them to make an arrangement to resolve this matter. And if I can just pause for a moment at this step and talk to the owners that are viewing this presentation. Please do not hesitate to resolve the matter at this stage, because the sooner you resolve the matter, the easier it is going to be for you to enter into that payment arrangement. We are not unhuman. We know that life happens, and we understand that. So normally at this stage, the trustees are willing to accept an arrangement, and they normally accept a 3 months or a 6 month repayment arrangement for you to settle this account. So use the opportunity, please. Don't be hesitant. After the summons has then been served and the 10 days lapse, we proceed to submit a request for default judgment at court. This means that once the judgment is granted, the owner will be blacklisted, and this will be reflecting your ITC. Once the default judgment has been requested at court, it can take 1 to 6 months for the court to grant sign. Also, again, depending on which court we are working with. Then once we receive the default judgment back from court, we proceed to issue a warrant of execution. A warrant of execution normally takes 2 to 3 weeks to issue at the court, depending obviously again on the court. And after it has been issued, it's been sent to the sheriff for the specific area to serve on the owner. The warrant is used to attach movable assets of the owner. So the sheriff will go to the unit, and if they find movable assets, they will attach them, and they will provide us with inventory of that. And in terms thereof, we will then remove the goods that were attached and sell it on a sheriff auction. The proceeds from this auction will be paid into the levy account, and then legal action will just proceed for the remaining balance. But that is not the only result that we can get from the warrant. If there is a tenant in the unit, the sheriff will also provide us with a return stating that there is a tenant in the unit. And at that stage, we can proceed with our application in terms of Section 72. This application allows us to get a court order to then attach the rental of the tenant. This means that the tenant will have to pay the monthly rental over to the managing agent for an amount equal to the judgment that was granted against the owner. Okay. Apart from that, the sheriff can also provide us with a return of non-service. That normally means that the sheriff could not find the owner or the tenant or any movable assets at the unit. So then they give us a return of non-service, and we have to trace the owner to get the residential address or work address where we can execute this warrant in. The fourth return that we can receive from the sheriff is a return of nola bona. This means that the sheriff did find the owner. So the owner was at a unit or at a residential address, but the owners do not have any movable assets that we can attach and sell. Once we receive this nola bona return of service, it means that we can proceed with an application to declare the immovable property executable. This means that the court will give us an order that we are allowed to sell this property on a sheriff auction. Once the order is granted, the court also set a reserve price. And a reserve price means that is the price at which the sheriff must start the auction. So they are not allowed to sell the property for an amount less than the reserve price. The reserve price is normally calculated by court on the market value of the property. So what they do is they take the market value of the property and they deduct the levies and the municipal account that's due, and then the balance they will set as the reserve price. The reason therefore is that when you buy a property on a sheriff auction, in terms of the conditions of sale, you need to pay the outstanding levies and municipal account on top of the purchase price. So that is the reason why they use that method to calculate the reserve price. Okay, so once the order has been granted, the sheriff will proceed. We will obviously first issue a warrant against the immovable property, but then the sheriff will proceed and they will attach the immovable property. And doing that means that the sheriff will proceed and they will send this attachment and give notice of it to the owner. So the owner will then be aware that we are going to sell his property. They give notice to the bond holder because they are obviously a very important party to the sale as well, to the deeds office as well as the municipality. Once this attachment process has then been finalized, which normally takes a month, the sheriff will provide us with a date of sale with terms and conditions of how the sale will happen. So that means they will inform us of when we need to do the publication of the sale. Normally it is done in the government gazette as well as in the citizen. Then once everything has been completed, the property will go on auction on this auction day. And on that date, the property will be sold to the highest bidder. This obviously must be a bit above the reserve price. So if the court has set a reserve price for 500,000, the sheriff is not allowed to accept any bid lower than that 500,000. Okay, so then once the property is sold, it is basically the normal transfer process that will follow. The purchaser will have to perform, and that means they will have to pay a deposit, get guarantees for their bond, and everything needs to be in order. And at that stage, the transfer attorney will request clearance figures from the body corporate for the total outstanding amount due for levies. The body corporate will then issue this certificate, and after that, the transfer attorney will be able to lodge at the deeds office and to register the property on the purchaser's name. Normally, this process takes approximately 3 months because it is a normal transfer process. So from the date it's sold and the purchaser needs to perform until date of registration is normally a period of 3 months. Then another process we follow, which is very efficient, is an application to terminate the electricity to a unit, where the owner fails to pay their monthly contributions. We can launch this application in cases where the estate is responsible for the municipal account and levy the charges onto the monthly levy statements of the owners. We normally launch this application after we obtained our judgment in the main action we have. And then once the court grants this order, we will send it to the sheriff, and the sheriff will go and execute it. The sheriff will execute it by going to the unit with an electrician, and they will terminate the electricity. And this is a very successful process where we have recovered a lot of money with this process already. And in a matter of fact, we just today received one of these orders at court in a matter that is actually problematic, but will be resolved now because of this order. Okay, then fees relating to collection by attorneys. Trafalgar has a fee structure in place with the panel attorneys like myself. We work on a party and party scale plus 25%. This is in line with the Sectional Title Scheme Management Act. So if we ever need to tax our costs, it comes to what the law allows us to get. Then in the case where the estate prefers to use their own attorneys, they must enter into a separate fee agreement with their attorneys, and they will be paid accordingly thereto. So it will not necessarily be on scale. Next slide.
Natasha, do you mind if I just stop you there, because we've got quite a few questions coming through about when fees can be charged to a client's account. Does it have to only be after judgment to authorize those charges to be collected? And which charges exactly are recoverable in terms of legal collections? Would you mind just answering that sort of fairly thoroughly, because there are a lot of queries around that?
Okay, the Sectional Title Scheme Management Act makes provision, therefore, that we are allowed, or that the body corporate or the HRA is allowed to charge a reasonable cost. Normally in a HRA, it's in terms of the MOI, but with regards to body corporates, it's in terms of the Sectional Title Management Scheme. So it's allowed to be charged a regional fee, and it's allowed to be loaded onto the owner's account, but the owner can request that, of course, be taxed at a later stage.
So it's fully collectible and recoverable at the point that it's loaded on the account, and that can be done before judgment stage. Is that right, Natasha?
That's correct, yes. Because the letter of demand forms part of the DCA fees, and the summons is legal fees, and the Act says that you are allowed to charge reasonable fees.
Okay. All right, thank you. Please carry on.
Okay, so CSOS collections versus the legal route. In case of levy collections, it is better to launch an action for collection of levies at court, as the court will award an order for costs as well as judgment for interest, opposed to the CSOS that does not give any order to cost and are not inclined to give any order for interest. So at this stage, I always recommend that we rather go the court route, as then the body corporate is guaranteed of getting a cost order to recover the legal cost, which they will not get from CSOS, and they will also be able to charge interest on the outstanding amount, where CSOS do not give an order for interest. Then on disputes based on conduct rules, like example fines or issues with animals, it is better to launch an application with CSOS, as it's definitely more cost effective and time effective. If you will go to court with such an application, you will have to approach the High Court. So the fees is going to be much more, and the timelines is going to be much longer, because the High Court rules is very fuller than the matters that's been handled by CSOS. Next slide. Okay, problem areas in the collection of arrear levies. As you know, there's always problem areas. Although we are past the problems created by COVID, we are now facing problems created by load shedding. Courts do not operate during load shedding, and that is currently creating backlogs, and even create situations where a matter gets postponed because there's no power at all. So load shedding is a problem at this stage. Then we are also facing problems at court with the issuing of summons. The problem we experience is obviously the time frame in which to issue the summons, because some courts you can go in and you issue your summons the same day and it's done, but there are courts that take 3 to 4 weeks to only issue the summons. So this means only to put a case number on your summons to allow you to proceed with action takes up to 4 weeks. So that can be problematic if you want to escalate a matter. Then also the courts only allow you to issue a certain number of summonses per day. So Randburg Court, for example, only allows you to issue 6 summonses. So if you have 10 summonses, you will only be able to issue 6, and you have to go back again to issue the other summonses. Okay, then with regards to the judgments, and the problem we experience is also the limitation on the number of judgments that can be submitted on a day. Because the same case is here. If you go to Randburg, we can only submit 6 judgments on a day, and we are also only allowed to draw 6 court files on that day. So that limits us on the amount of work that we can perform. And then also magistrates take long to grant judgment because of their workload. They are granting judgment not only for levies, but for all other matters. So they get piles and piles of judgments per day to grant, and that is the reason why some courts take up to 6 months to grant that judgment. Then the process is also delayed when the court issue a query. Most of the time, the query we receive is ridiculous and it's actually just a waste of time, but we need to attend to it then. Like the courts wants a levy statement that starts on a 0 balance. But in some cases where an owner doesn't pay their levies at all, we need to institute a second action. And there's no way that you can give them a statement from a 0 balance if you issue a second action. But we have resolved this, and we do a separate recon so that I can see it starts on a 0. And then sometimes they request like a specific resolution that I want us to attach, or AGM minutes, and then we have to answer there to and resubmit it. So meaning the time frame starts from start for them to grant a judgment then. Next slide. Okay. We are depending on sheriff officers to render services to us, but unfortunately, they do not always serve the documents as per our instructions. So if we send them to serve, for example, on a company, we tell them this is the owner is a company and it needs to be served on this company, and you need to give us a return stating it was served on the registered address of the company. Then they serve it and they can't find the company in this building. They will give us a return of service to say it's a non-service. After we ask them specifically, it must be served on the registered address. And in that case, we need to resend it to the sheriff to do the service again. What is also taking very long at the sheriffs is to execute a warrant, meaning to go to the property and actually do the attachment. That takes 4 to 6 weeks. And then once the attachment has been made and they must proceed with the removal, some sheriffs take up to 3 months to do that removals due to the fact that they, for example, only have 1 truck at the sheriff's office that do the removals, and they do approximately 1 to 2 removals per day. So you get in the queue and it can take up to 3 months. Then one of our biggest problem areas is the master office. The master office takes months to appoint executors in deceased estates and even to appoint curators in insolvent estates. The other problem is if the master appoints executor, they sometimes appoint somebody that doesn't have the knowledge to finalize this estate because the property needs to be sold or transferred to the family member, and they don't know how to do that. So then the body corporate ends up issuing action against the executor just to get them moving. Then another problem is when a property is registered in a trust name, we need to issue the summons against the trustees of the trust, and we need to obtain those details from the master's office. And that sometimes takes quite a while to get the master to get that file for us and to allow us to get that information. So the master, I will say, is at this stage almost the biggest problem we have and with the most delays. Okay, next slide. Okay, the deeds office is not really a problem at this stage. At the stage, there was a backlog at the deeds office, but that has been resolved. Pretoria deeds office was closed now for a few days because they were moving offices, and there was rumors that they were closed indefinitely, but that was only rumors. They have opened again on Monday the 17th, and they are operating normally. So I won't say that the deeds office is really a problem at this stage, not that I'm aware of, and not in the Gauteng area. And then sometimes the attorneys, the transfer attorneys, do struggle to get clearance figures from municipalities, and that can delay a transfer. Okay, that is it from my side. Thanks a lot, Andrew.
All right, excellent. Thanks very much, Natasha. Just some very good questions that have come through, if I could maybe just pose them to you. The first one, Natasha, is it legal to load levy arrears on a prepaid meter, whether that prepaid meter is water or electricity?
Andrew, I do not really work with the prepaid meters. I'm not sure if Trafalgar had a situation where they did that previously, but I have never dealt with such a situation yet.
Okay, good. Karine, do you want to come in there? Otherwise, I can comment as well.
Yeah, Andrew, it's not really legal to load, because what trustees want us sometimes to do is to load it on the prepaid meter so that they have to pay the levy arrears first before they can buy electricity, and that is not allowed legally.
Okay, yeah, that's correct. So that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And certainly there are trustees that decide to do that anyway. And certainly it is effective because it does interrupt electricity supply, and we've seen that work. So it isn't legal, and I think it's certainly, we can't recommend to do it because it's not legal, but there are trustees that decide to do that, and we have seen positive results. And, you know, just to emphasize the point that as far as possible, we should, you know, it's important to look for levers to collect arrear levies. So we spoke about blacklisting as one, and Claire mentioned a number of centralized amenities. That means, you know, services to the individual units like DSTV, like internet connectivity, like, you know, access through a residence lane in a property, anything at all that can cause inconvenience, that can put pressure on a particular owner to pay their levy arrears. And those examples I gave are legal. The trustee should look for those opportunities, and certainly they could discuss with the portfolio managers to implement that. And we definitely have seen successful results from using those interruptions of centralized amenities to try and collect arrear levies. Natasha, can I ask you, you know, what answer would you give if I said, how long does the legal process take? So from a handover from a managing agent for a legal debtor, how long will it take you to go through those steps you've explained to get to the end of the process to collect arrear levies?
Yes, it's obviously difficult to give a point amount of time, because it obviously depends if the sheriff are able to execute a warrant on the first time or not, and if we have to go to another time. But I will say, from the letter of demand to the stage where we are at a point where we can proceed with a Rule 46 is probably about 12 months. If you take in consideration that only the judgment can take 6 months itself. In courts like Kempton Park, again, they grant our judgment within a month. So the time frame in that case will be shorter, because then we will be able to, at the 6 month stage, already be at the Rule 46 point. But with courts like Randburg and Pretoria North, where the judgment is taking longer, the process is also going to take longer.
Okay, so it depends where the property is based and where the
Yes.
debtor is based as well, which court.
Definitely.
All right. Okay, everyone, it's 6 o'clock, so we're unfortunately out of time. I've answered about sort of almost 80 questions. I haven't quite got to all of them, but you see contact details on the screen in front of you. Please don't hesitate to email one of us if you would like a response. If you've got a specific case that is proving problematic or is being a challenge, we're more than welcome to arrange a review discussion with Benazir or Claire and myself. We can discuss it with you or your trustees with the specific circumstances involved. It's difficult to generalize, and it's important to look at a particular case and the history and the status of the legal files. So we'll gladly do that for you, and please reach out and we'll set up an online discussion to do that. You'll see our next webinar is on the 25th of May. We'll be covering the topic of tenure maintenance plans in sectional title schemes and just facility management best practices, which we would recommend the trustees to be aware of and to apply. Thank you very much for attending. I hope you have a good evening. I hope you found the discussion useful and helpful. And as I said, we're more than welcome to provide any other answers that weren't covered tonight, and, you know, an investigation review in terms of particular cases that are long-standing. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your evening and good night.